All right, today we're going to start chapter 7 on percent. 7.1 is going to be percent, decimals, and fractions. So what is percent? Well, it's per 100. If you think about the pieces here, it's going to be per cent is 100, so it's going to be parts per 100, and so we can just take the x over 100, whatever percent it is. And that's going to how we're going to represent percent. Now we can take and convert percent to fractions. And so what we do there is we basically change a percent to a fraction. We drop the percent sign, and then we put the number over 100. So if we had some number 20%, we'd put 20%. We'd drop the percent, we'd have 20. Put that over 100, 20 over 100, and then we'd reduce the fraction to lowest terms. Now, if we want to do percent to decimal, basically we're going to change a percent to a decimal by dropping the percent, moving the decimal 2 places to the left, and that will be our decimal value. Now, the corollary to that is taking the decimal and going to a percent. And so basically to do that, we're going to move the decimal first 2 places to the right, and then we're going to add our percent sign back. Now, a fraction to percent, there's a couple of ways you can do that. First, you can divide the numerator by the denominator to change the fraction to a decimal. And then after that, we can move the decimal 2 places to the right and add a percent sign. Or we can create equivalent fractions with a denominator of 100. So you'd have some, percent where your fraction equals x over 100, and then you have to figure out the proportion what x is. And then after that, you take that numerator, the new fraction, and add your percent sign. So we'll be doing all of those to kind of give examples, but this is kind of an overview of where we're going and what we're doing today. So our first one says, convert to a fraction from a percent. So what we have is this mixed fraction and our mixed number, percent. And so what we have to do is first convert to the improper fraction and drop our percent sign. And then after we have that done, we're going to put that over 100. So we have 4 times 7 is 28, plus 1 is 29, over 4. We drop our percent sign, and then we put it over 100. Okay. Now we have to reduce and simplify. Well, you have a fraction divided by a number. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply by the reciprocal. And whatever we do in the denominator, we also have to do in the numerator. So when we do that, 100 cancels 100. We just have 1 down here, so we can ignore this now. Now this, we can't reduce the 29. And so basically all we end up with is 29 times 1 is 29. 4 times 100 is 100, and then that is our converting our fraction from a percent, converting to a fraction rather, to a percent, from a percent. I'll get this right here soon. So we've converted this percent into this fraction. Now the same thing is going to happen here. We're going to drop the percent sign. This time we don't have fractions, so we just drop our percent, so we get 15.2. We put that over 100, and then we reduce. Well, first problem is we have this decimal here. So we have to get rid of all decimals in our fraction. And so to do that, if we multiply the numerator by 10 and the denominator by 10, that'll move our decimal place 1 over. And so that's going to give us 152 over 1,000. Okay, so now we've gotten rid of decimals and we have a fraction, but now guess what? We have to reduce our fraction. So we have to think about how we can reduce 152 over 100. Well, 152 divided by 2 will give us our first reduction we can do. So that's going to give us a 7. That's 14. Subtract, that's a 1. Bring down our 2. And that's going to go in 6. And that's going to give us 0. So 76 over, and that's going to give us 76 over. Well, 1,000 divided by 2 is 500. Well, now I notice I can still divide by 2. So I can take, okay, well, now I have 2 into 76. Well, 2 will go in here 3 times. That's going to give me a 6, and 1 6. That's an 8. Well, okay, so that's going to give me 38 over. Half of 500 is 250. Well, here we got another one we can divide by. Now, anytime along the way, if you can see bigger numbers you can reduce with, that's fine. And so now we have 38, and we divide that by 2. That goes in once, that's 2. Subtract, that's 1. Bring down the 8, that goes in 9. So it's 18. We subtract that 0. So now we have 19 over. Well, half of 250 is 125. Now 19 is prime. It's not going to go into this because that's just 5 times 5 times 3 fives. And so that then would be our fraction in reduced form for 15.2%. Okay. Now, if we divided this back out and put it into decimal form and then I moved our decimal places, we would get back to this 15.2%. All right, so now what we want to do is convert to a decimal from the percent, okay? So when we convert to a decimal from a percent, first we drop our percent sign. So boom, that's easy to do. And now all we have to do is we have to move our decimal 2 places to the left. So if we think about what that means, our decimal starts here. If we move 2 places to the left, that means it goes here. And so our percent to a decimal gives us 0.04. And that would be then our decimal form of the percent. So 4% then goes to 0.04. Same thing here. We're going to drop to 145. We're going to drop a percent, and then we're going to move our decimal 2 places to the left. So I better add some zeros. So 1, 2, and so our answer would be 0.002145. And that would be our decimal representation of this percent. Now 155%, well, we write our number down, we drop our percent sign. Remember, this is where our decimal is, so if we move it 2 places to the left, that goes to here, and we get 1.55 as our decimal format for 155%. Okay, and so that's how it works. Again, this is probably the easiest one. All you have to do is drop your percent sign and move your decimal 2 places to the left, and we have our answer. What about ones where we want to convert to a percent from a decimal? Well, these are pretty easy too. So we just write down our decimal. Now we're going to move 2 spaces to the right and then add a percent sign. So let's add some zeros out here. So we're going to move 2 places to the right. So we're going to go 1, 2, and so that's our decimal place. So now we have 510%. Okay. Well, this one, 0.008. Well, we're going to move the decimal 1, 2, so that gives us 0.8%. Again, this is almost as easy as the going the other way, where we go percent to the decimal, but that way you have to move it to the left. Now when we're going from a decimal to a percent, we move it to the right. Okay, so here we have 3.372. Again, move 2 places to the right, 1, 2, and so we get 337.2. Add a percent sign, and that would be our percent coming from the decimal 3.372. Okay, all right. Now we're going to convert to a percent from a fraction. So this is where we have 2 possible ways we can do it. We can do it by, dividing, getting a decimal, and then moving our decimal place 2 places, or we can do the proportions. So maybe let's do the decimal division first. And so what we have to do is we have to take 8 into 29 because we need to get our decimal equivalent first. So 8 will go into 29. If we take it times 3, that'll give us 24. Subtract that, that's 5. Bring down to 0. 8 times 6, that's going to give us 48. Subtract, that'll give us 2. Bring down a 0. 8 times 2 is 16. Subtract that, we get 4. Bring down our next 0. Well, now we have 8 times 5. That's going to give us 40. Subtract, now we get 0. So that is going to be the decimal equivalent. So that's going to be 3.625. So we know from the decimal equivalent from the previous work here, we're going from decimal to the percent. Now we just have to move the decimal 2 places to the right. So when we do that, 3.625, 2 places to the right, 1, 2, that gives us 362.5%. And so that would be going from the fraction to the percent when we do the division first. Now we could also go the other way using proportions. 29 over 8 equals x over 100. okay? Now we did these in the last chapter, proportions, and so we're going to take 29 times 100, because we're going to do the cross product, and that's going to equal 8 times x. All right, well, we're going to divide by 8, and divide by 8, and so that's gone here, and so we have x equals, now that's 2900 divided by 8. Now we have to do that division, and when we do it, what's going to happen is that's going to give us the value here. And remember, whatever that value is over 100, all we'd have to do is add the percent sign. So we take 8 and into 2900. Well, guess what? It's not going to be too much different dividing here. So that's going to be a 3. That's going to be a 24. Subtract, that's a 5. Bring down a 0. And that's going to be our 6. That's going to give us 48. Subtract, that's 2. Bring down our next 0. And then we're going to take times 2. That's going to give us 16. Subtract, that's going to give us a 4. Now we're going to bring down our next 0. And that decimal still goes there. So that's going to be a 5. That's 40. We subtract that 0. And so this is what x is. Put their decimal up here in a box maybe to help. And so then x equals 362.5. And now all we have to do is add a percent sign. And so if we add a percent sign, that is our percent. So again, one way you can just take and do your division of the fraction, get a value, move your decimal 2 places to the right, add a percent, and we have it that way. Or we can do the proportion way, and then when we get done, whatever that value is there, we just add our percent sign and we're done there. Okay, so both ways work, just depends on which one you think is better, or which one makes more sense to you. All right, so now the next one we have is 7 over 8. So we're going to take 8 into 7. Again, I don't know how many decimal places we'll need. So 8 will go into 70. Well, 8 times 8 is 64. Subtract that, that's going to give us 6. Bring down our 0. 8 times 7 is 56. Subtract that, that's a 4. Bring down our next one, which is 0. And that's going to be a 5. And then that multiplies out to give us 40. And so now we have 87.5. So that's the equivalent in decimals. And then we just have to move the decimal place 1, 2. And so that gives us 87.5%. And so that is going to be our percent. Now again, we could do the equivalent proportions. And so we'd have 7 over 8 equals x over 100. We cross multiply, we get 7 times 100 equals 8 times x. Divide by our 8. And so basically we have x equals 700 over 8. Well, now we have to do that division. So we have 700 divided by 8. And so 8 will go in here 8 times, that's 64. Subtract, that's going to give us 6. Bring down our 0, that's going to give us a 7, so that's 56. Subtract, that's a 4. Bring down our next 0. Then we have to put our decimal there, that's a 5. That's a 40. Subtract, that gives us 0. And so now we have, that's equal to 87.5, and all we have to do is add our percent sign, because this one was over the 100. That's what x was equal to. And so now after we put it over 100, we have that as a percent. So we can change it to a percent. So we get rid of the 100 on the bottom, and we just say 87.5%. Okay, and again, they match no matter which way you do it. All right, so here it says we have 5 of the last 8 hurricanes in 2008 were categorized as major. Write the fractional number as a percent. Well, okay. Well, our fractional number is we had 5 out of 8 was major hurricanes. So what do? Well, we just have to do it. And I'm just going to do one way this time. I'm just going to say, okay, well, I'm going to take 8 into the 5 and see what I get, and then I just have to move my decimal place 2 places to the right. Okay, so 8 times what? Well, 8 times 6 is 48. So I could subtract that, that's 2, bring down the 0. Well, 8 times 2 is 16, subtract, that's 4, bring down our 0. And so now we have 8 times 5, that's going to be 40. I don't know what that is there, but anyway, 40. And subtract that, that's 0. So this is equivalent to 0.625. So now I know that if I take that number, move the decimal 1, 2 places to the right, and add a percent, 62.5%, that will give me the equivalent percent from that fraction. Okay. And that's all I have today. I'll do some more examples here in a little bit.